Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Improving Driver Safety Can Fleets Really Change Driver Behavior, a webinar featuring leading compliance expert Kelly Anderson, sponsored by Fleet Locate by Spireon. This is Belinda Rufer on behalf of Spireon, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Today's agenda includes 50 minutes for our featured presentation and 10 minutes for questions at the end. But first, just a few housekeeping items. In the black control bar, which appears either at the top or the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A icon. To ask questions, simply click on that icon and then type your questions into the pop-up questions box. We'll compile your questions and give Kelly an opportunity to address them during the Q&A session at the end of the program. So now let me introduce our speaker. Kelly Anderson has worked in the transportation industry for the past 30 years in positions including federal law enforcement officer, professional driver, driver trainer, driver recruiter, safety supervisor, safety manager over a recruiting department for a 1,700 truck fleet. Using these experiences, Kelly founded Impact Solutions in January 1998. Kelly is also the chairman of the American Trucking Association Driver Recruitment, Driver Retention, and Driver Wellness Committee. He's an adjunct instructor for 2 colleges and is on the board of directors for the Missouri Trucking Association. So in short, we are very excited to have a driver retention expert with us today to share some insight on how to address driver safety. So let's get started. Kelly?
Belinda, thank you so much for your intro, and I want to thank Fleet Locate by Spireon for their sponsorship of today's webinar. And let me get my slides turned on and flipped around to the right screen, and we'll get right into it. And if that's a mistake right there, somebody let me know. But I think we're good to go. So folks, let's get into modifying worker behavior. And you know, the first thing I wanted to touch on there are some bonuses and punishment. First off, punishment has no training value. You know, I was 8 years old at Goliad Elementary School in San Angelo, Texas, and I did not do my math homework. So Mrs. Green took me and James Fisher down to the principal's office, and the principal said, "Boys, why didn't you do your homework?" And I said, "Sir, the reason I didn't do my homework is I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get math." And I did all my other homework. You know, I thought I'd throw that in there. Maybe it, you know, make a difference. But anyway, I did all my other homework, and if you'd show me the trick, on the math trick, you know, I'll do it too. He said, "Son, there is no trick. You just have to do it." And so James Fisher, he asked James, "Son, why did you do your homework?" And James said, "My dog ate it." And I was like, "Really?" You know, I was feeling bad for old James. The principal was not buying in. And he looked at us and said, "Boys, you're going to have to give you a spanking." Now, folks, at 8 years old, I looked at that principal and I said, "Sir, you can give me a spanking, but I still won't know math." Now, I got to believe if James Fisher wasn't there, that might have been the deal. I mean, he might have let me pass a little bit and figured out what we can do. But James was there, so we kind of had to hold the line, I think. And by the way, I just want to put on record that watching James Fisher get a whipping was worth the price of admission. I mean, that dude can walk on ceilings. It was amazing. So anyway, we went and got our whippings, and guess what? After it was all over, I still didn't know math. And so, folks, I see people saying, "You know what? If you have this issue, we're going to give you a warning letter. You have this issue, we're going to give you another warning letter. Oh, you know what? We're going to give you time off with pay." Folks, if they don't know how to do it, they still don't know how to do it. And the other thing, as I look at fleets, you know, well, we hire experienced drivers, so they should know. Well, so my question is, if that experienced driver had worked for you the entire time, would they have learned it from you? So first off, punishment doesn't have any training value. Secondly, not all bonuses change behavior. This may absolutely shock you, you know, the fact that I started in the industry as a driver, was driver trainer, worked in safety. But, you know, I've talked with drivers that have millions of miles of accident free. And me as a driver myself, not millions, 500,000, but, you know, asking, why do we drive safely? Why do we inspect our vehicles? Why do we drive the speed limit? Why do we get out and look? Why do we do all those things? We do them because we know how to do them, and we don't want them on our record. I never once thought to myself, oh man, I better increase my following distance here because I don't want to lose my safety bonus. So I don't believe that safety bonuses change behavior at all. Most drivers see it as a foregone conclusion they're going to receive it. And I don't know anybody that goes the extra mile to do the right thing because they don't want to lose their safety bonus. They do it because they know how to do the right thing and they don't want to have a blemish on their record. And some bonuses reward the wrong behavior and increase your risk. I think about productivity bonuses at that point. Folks, you know, I'm a court-certified expert witness in Oklahoma and Louisiana. And boy, you get that as they try to dauber to you and disqualify you as an expert, and the court sustains your qualifications. And every time we get into a case, the first thing they want to try to ding you on is that your driver shouldn't have been where they were when they were there. And they also want to tie most accidents, and most accidents can be tied back to some sort of inattentiveness and fatigue. So now you have a productivity bonus, and the plaintiff's attorney is quickly going to jump up and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this company not only condones their drivers to push it and to drive when they're tired and bend the hours of service. Of course, with ELDs, that's going away. But to bend the hours of service, they actually reward it. And folks, that is just not something that you and I want to wear. So, you know, productivity bonuses, another reason why fleets do it is, of course, they want to increase productivity. What we need to do is increase our management abilities and have better fleet managers managing drivers and working with drivers to increase our productivity, not by a bonus, which from a legal and risk standpoint, reward the wrong behavior and increase your risk for punitive damages. Talking about punitive damages, so when you think about some of the industry issues, you know, first off, CSA, the entire situation with CSA was to stop events before they happen. You know, and carrier safety is one of the 5 major FMCSA focus areas. Plaintiffs' attorneys, when you go to court, one of the biggest things that they're getting punitive damage awards based on is inadequate training. A matter of fact, there was out in West Texas an accident a couple of years ago, and the punitive damage award for inadequate training was for $54 million. You guys might remember the New York City, when there was a couple of New York City police officers in that motorcycle gang, and that SUV ran over a couple of motorcycles and such and people. $30,000. What I'm really most shocked about is there was only $30,000, but $30,000 punitive damage, inadequate training. You can just go case after case on that. So the increased operating expense is one of our industry issues. And I mean, this year, everybody's looking at their compensation for their drivers and having to increase it because we do not have enough drivers. I saw a report yesterday that said we are 279,000 drivers short. I think that was FTI, it was a consulting firm, came out with that. 279,000 drivers short today. So we definitely have an issue. And that's just talking about our worker shortage. This article actually continued to talk about, you know, people not coming into the industry. And in most industries, when there's a shortage, it doesn't affect our country. But when there's a shortage of drivers, our country will realize major interruption and inflation. You know, if you have a shortage of cooks, you know, they raise their prices and people stop, so they can raise their wages and people stop eating out as much and everything levels out. You have a shortage of drivers and we keep raising wages, and people start, you know, charging more to haul we have to charge more to haul the freight, they have to charge more for the products, and inflation goes through the roof. This was a very interesting article that I was reading yesterday about that, all of that. And we're in the middle of it, folks. So, and you can see that punitive damages for negligence often exceeds millions of dollars. We've got to figure out how to overcome that. So, you know, the proverbial Pittsburgh. You know, we see fatality accidents, we see serious injuries, but but that's above the water. What's below the water? And we have, first off, the basis of everything is the at-risk behavior. We've got to change the behavior to start changing the outcomes. Now, folks, one of the problems that we have with training today is most drivers see training as punishment. And the reason they see it as punishment, and let's just be real, is because the only time we assign it is punishment. So we've got to start changing the mindset. Our drivers are among serious professionals in our industry and in our country. Doctors, lawyers, nurses, accountants, pilots, every professional in our country takes initial and ongoing professional development. And we need to start shifting this behavior and this mindset in drivers so that they don't see it as punishment, but they see it as part of their professional credentials. And so when you start changing the at-risk behavior, then all of the other outcomes start changing and to the better. You have a lot of near misses, you have a lot of minor injuries, then those, of course, are going to lead to the more serious injuries and fatalities. And we want to stop this paradigm. What's one of the first ways to modify behavior? Folks, we do not have control over anybody. The only person we have control over is ourselves. Our actions, our attitude is what we have control over. All we have over other people is influence. And one of the most powerful questions I have found that I can ask drivers, and frankly, I ask managers, office employees, but when I ask drivers, it's supposed to be related to training, and to get them to take their training, is why do you do what you do? It's amazing when I do driver safety meetings and I ask that question to an audience of drivers, folks, why do we do what we do? And I mean, you'll hear to move the freight, to keep America going, and on and on and on and on. And I'll say, no, that's not why we do it. Finally, somebody says, so I can feed my family. And I am like, amen, brother or sister. Yes, that is exactly why we do what we do. The truth is, when you think about everybody that's on this call today, why are you doing what you're doing today? Why am I here? We are all doing what we're doing so we can provide for our families. So folks, if that's our goal, then let's make sure that every decision we make is in perfect alignment with reaching that goal. And from a driver's standpoint, then that means, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I'm rested. I'm going to make sure that I'm attentive. I'm going to make sure I know how to pre-trip my truck, and I'm going to do it and keep my hours of service right and up to date. And I'm going to drive my vehicle safely. I'm going to get out and look, and I'm going to check my mirrors, and on and on. All of those things that lead to a career without DOT violations, without tickets, without accidents and cargo claims, and a successful career. So, but the truth is, it's amazing to me the number of, like, you drive down the road, and the number of drivers, whether it's car drivers or truck drivers, and we're talking about truck drivers here, but how close they're following the vehicle in front of them. And they have absolutely no clue that, first, if you're 100% paying attention, the first thing you have to do is observe what's about to happen. Next, you have to react to what's about to happen. Next, you've got to get your foot on the brake and apply the brakes, and then there's a lag there too. And by the time you take the observing to the reacting to the brake lag, most trucks will have already hit the car before the brakes ever hit the chamber. Why? Because they're clueless. Folks, how do we start modifying behavior? First, we've got to get them to want to. we've got to influence them, get them thinking about why they're doing what they're doing. Secondly, we need to give them the training so that they understand how, the dangers, and understand how to do it properly. A lot of folks have learned how to do things just kind of by trial and error, not by professional development. And you see that when I work with a lot of clients that have routes that they run, and one guy will run the route and be done in 6 hours. Somebody else runs the route and it takes them 10 hours. Well, the guy that does it in 6 hours has figured out where to cut the corners and where to streamline his efforts to do it better. The other guy, well, he'll figure it out eventually. Let's get into professional development. So, training ought to be, you ought to have initial training. Talking about orientation, a lot of fleets do pre-orientation, classroom training. And by the way, when we talk about orientation, and this could be a whole nother webinar. One of the things that I've seen happen in the industry is we used to have 5-day orientations. And then we got them down to about 2.5 days. And I find about 2.5 is your best schedule, by the way. And it's amazing. I was talking to some fleets here in the last 3 months or so, and they're like, man, Kelly, one of the biggest problems we have is guys understanding and remembering and getting what we're telling them in orientation. So what I'm deciding to do is I'm going to go back to a week-long orientation. Wait a minute. So they can't comprehend and follow what you're saying in 2.5 days. So now we're going to see if they can comprehend and follow what you're saying in 5 days. I don't think that works. So we need to. We're going to talk in a moment. How do adults learn? But first off, we ought to have initial training. You could have some training the drivers take before they even show up to orientation. Second, what is it that you need to look them in the eye when you're saying to them, and paperwork that you need to get done. Maybe that's beyond the classroom. Next, what about continuing orientation beyond the classroom in the first 30 days? So that's stuff you want them to know, but they don't absolutely have to know before they roll. And you don't want to look them in the eye when you say it. Maybe you continue orientation through the first 30 days. And by the way, probably reassign information that you taught in class, so they get that refresher. Because the truth is, you can't comprehend everything that's been told to you in a meeting either. So ongoing, because isn't it amazing how many times we'll listen to something the second time around and we catch things we didn't catch the first time? It's the same principle. You ought to have ongoing training, professional development, and then of course corrective action. But folks, there is no training opportunity in the heat of the moment. Whether we're talking about, and I don't mean to say that drivers are children, but folks, this is true whether you're talking with a horse, with a dog, with a child, with an adult. Most managers with employees, most people want to, when there's something going on, they want to grab the event and say, hey, stop, and don't do it that way anymore, do it this way. And then they wonder why a few minutes later or the next day, the person is doing the same thing again. How many times do I have to tell you not to do it that way? Well, folks, if we keep doing the same thing and keep getting the same result, and we keep doing the same thing, what result are we going to get? We've got to stop the behavior in the moment so somebody doesn't lose an eyeball or a hand or fall off a cliff. Stop the behavior. But you want to modify behavior? Get out of the heat of the moment. Call the employee into your office and, hey, John, I want to talk to you about, I saw you out in the parking lot there, and then I noticed, the way you were doing the dolly handles on your trailer, and I asked you to stop that. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Man, John, let me show you a couple of pictures. Now, I understand you've done it a whole lot of times. And you know what? So did this guy. But when it goes wrong, it goes real bad wrong. And you can see the damage here. The reason I'm asking you not to do that is, John, I don't want you hurt. Because when you're off for medical, you're not working and you're not making any money. course, you might get work comp, but we don't want to go there. But you see, outside of the heat of the moment, we're able to talk now about why and start modifying that behavior. You're not going to have a lasting impression in the heat of the moment. And man, I could go on and on and on with examples of that. But you know, folks, we're busy. So most of the time, we just want to say it, correct it, and move on. But folks, it just doesn't work. You all know it because we've done it for so long, and we still getting the same results that we get. You've got to stop the behavior in the middle of the situation and then talk to them later outside the heat of the moment to influence them. You know, adults learn by seeing and hearing and doing. So, you know, I went through an orientation once that they did their operations training. You know, last webinar we did with Fleet Locating was Memoirs of the Undercover Trucker. And I talked about the orientations that I go through undercover and such. And by the way, if you guys weren't on that and you want a copy, I bet you could email your Spireon contact and they can get you a copy of that. Sorry about that, Belinda. Probably just gave you a whole bunch of work. So I'm in trouble, guys. Anyway, but this particular orientation, on Monday, they gave us the, you know, they talked to us about the operations and safety and hours of service and how they want things inspected and the paperwork supposed to do. They did that all on Monday. And that night, they gave us a trip. And they gave us a logbook. And they said, we want you to plan this trip and log this trip over to Oklahoma and back exactly as we've taught it today. And so we did that. We all went back. We had our atlases and we planned our trip and logged it and everything and did all the paperwork as they had described that day. And we had templates and such. So we just were able to refer to the template. And so then the next day we came back, and the first thing we had to do was get onto the Qualcomm and then do the circle of service on the satellite device. And folks, I'm going to tell you, of all the orientations that I've gone through in the last 20 years undercover, I've left that orientation absolutely feeling like I knew exactly what to do and how to do it, and I knew where to call. I knew what messages to send, when to send them. I knew the paperwork to do, and I felt very prepared. Whereas I can tell you, I leave most, and if I had to go out and get paid the next day, I'm going to have a lot of questions for my fleet manager. What did they give us a chance to do? We got a chance to see it in class. We heard it, and then we did it. That was the magic. So keep that in mind as you think about your orientation curriculums and such, and your training curriculum. But what's some of the challenges that we have providing training to our fleets? Well, first off is time. You know, some of you folks, you are wearing a lot of hats. You're the recruiter, you're the safety director, and some of you do payroll on top of all that. And so time is an issue. And frankly, it doesn't matter. You know, that's a small fleet. There's some big fleets. Folks, we had 1,720 trucks, so we had all the staff. And I'm going to tell you, we didn't have time either. It was a challenge for us as well. Second thing is consistency. You know, some fleets that get a little bit bigger, they start trying to have orientations at different parts in the country. And so, you know, are we getting the same thing trained at all the different locations across the country? And frankly, let's say we do it all at this location. Do we train it and present it the same every time? Training materials and topics is also a challenge, especially for ongoing development. You know, what am I going to talk about this month? So, and then of course, maintaining records. Because folks, whenever the accident happens and the plaintiff's attorney asks, hey, where are you on this? I mean, did you provide training in the deposition? Do you provide training and development for your employees? And then the answer is yes. Well, then what training did this person take? And if you can't produce the records, then it didn't happen. So you've got to be able to show them what was trained, when it was trained, their level of understanding, which would be a test score, and you've got to be able to produce the records as well. So how do we do some of that stuff? Well, folks, I was asked recently, how many fleets do you think use e-learning? I don't think 50% of fleets in America use e-learning yet. There's a thing called the S-curve of innovation, and from 0 to 20% of a population, that time period is the same time period that it takes to go from 20% to 80% of the population. I believe we're beyond 20%, but I don't believe we're above 50%, just based on the fleets I talk with. And the truth is, there's many of those that do use e-learning, and they only use it for corrective action. And I hope that I can influence you today and think about if e-learning or any type of training is good for corrective action, then why isn't it good for proactive so that we can stop events before they happen? So one thing that e-learning provides, of course, is a way to change the behaviors and the outcomes, because we're able to give initial and ongoing and corrective action training. The other, it gives you the quality management, because the content is presented the same every single time. And the fact that it's being assigned and utilized, you're able to start modifying behavior, because they understand why they need to do the right thing. They're motivated to want to do it because they want to take care of their family, and now they know how to do it, and it'll start changing that behavior and changing that culture. So we have a culture of safety now, rather than a culture of let's just get her done at all costs, which that is not a good long-term plan. And of course, organizational development, creating and improving the professionalism of your entire team over time. And I'm talking your driving and non-driving team. So you have a continuous improvement process. It focuses on changing behavior and ultimately the outcomes. And it's available anytime and anywhere. I'll tell you one thing that is very important, kind of a side note, is ease of access. If it's only accessible, via computer, that tends to be a problem. Most e-learning is taken on smartphones, or I should say, well, yeah, even with people that don't have mobile apps. We happen on Impact e-learning, we actually have mobile apps, which the majority of our training now is all taken on mobile apps. But even before we had that, most of the training was taken on smartphones. So the mobile apps, man, it just absolutely increased the completion rate. Once it's easy for them to do, then they're much more apt to do it as well. So hey, it drives consistency in your presentation. It's proactive instead of just reactive, and it's so much cheaper, because one of the challenges you have, if you're doing face-to-face training, you are taking them out of the truck. You're having to route the truck to a location, stop the truck, you're taking them out of the truck, and you're taking up your instructor's time. There's a lot of cost related to that. If that driver's down for one day, what are you making revenue per day per truck? Most fleets tell me about $750. Well, you didn't make $750 that day in order to do that 1 hour class. So, not counting the deadhead miles and such. So, and it's also available immediately for corrective action. So you have the conversation, you assign the training, and then they get it done in a short period of time. So, man, I just realized I'm at the, we had more time than we needed for questions. So I hope we get a whole bunch of questions, guys. I did not realize that I was scooting along so quickly. I'm going to shift this back to Belinda, and we're going to start enjoying some questions here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Let's see some of the questions that we have. So I do have a couple here, and keep in mind, everyone, if you have questions from the audience, please use the little Q&A button at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on how your Zoom window is configured, if you have a question for Kelly. But I do have a couple here already, so let's go ahead and get started. Hold one second. So the first question is about bonuses. So are you saying that we shouldn't give bonuses to drivers at all?
Oh, thank you for asking that, because I talked about the ones that didn't work. Absolutely not. Folks, Fuel bonus, I find, is absolutely effective. But still, you need to start with training. It's amazing to me, sitting in town, some guy in a bobtail sitting next to me, and he's bumping every gear in the box. Or, somebody in a semi, and you can tell, come on, truckers. You and I can look at a truck and we know, are they running heavy or are they running light? And you're looking at those tires and they're standing tall, and you know that box is empty. And he's bumping every gear in the box and bumping the governor on every one of them. And then the Jake brakes hitting to lower the RPM so we can grab the next gear. That guy doesn't understand how to drive economically. He has no clue what skip shifting is. And guys, when I go to orientations, I was raised skip shifting. I mean, when I was, a trainer at CFI, a student at CFI, they talked to us about progressive shifting, talked to us about skip shifting, talked to us about how many more gallons you burn. You lose 0.2 of a mile per gallon for every mile per hour above 55 miles per hour. You burn X amount of fuel at idle. We knew all that stuff. But here's amazing. I take road tests, and road test examiners want me to hit every gear in the box. And I told them, I say to them, I have been taught skip shifting and progressive shifting, and that's how I drive. And I do it so that I use the least amount of fuel possible. And most folks then you hear a driver say, well, I'll skip shift when I can, which translates to me, he never skip shifts. Because I usually skip shift, even going down an on-ramp. That's a downhill situation. You can bump up to just as many RPMs as you need and skip 2 or 3 gears, and then ease into the next one, and there you go. So, in watching your turbo boost as well. But when you give a fuel bonus, it really motivates them. Yeah, you know what? I do need to try. I do need to be thinking about this because I can make an extra, X amount per mile. Sorry, that was a long answer. I'm a little passionate about fuel.
That's good. Well, we had a related questions, and so you talked about bonuses for fuel. Are there any other behaviors that bonuses can change?
This is not maybe it's a driver-related one. I do management coaching as well, and I was just in a management call right before this one, talking to a president, and I was talking with him about bonuses for his non-driving staff, and about like one that we have at Impact. Each one of my department heads are given a percentage of every client that they. The revenue from every client that they have in their division. And at the end of every year, we take a percentage for any client we've had over a year, that we take a percentage of that revenue and put it in a bucket, and then that becomes a bonus. And the reason we did that was to, first off, I don't have to worry about pay raises now. You want a pay raise? Grow your division. Secondly, we want to take care of and keep our clients. So, they're motivated for that as well. And I was just talking to a trucking company president, and he was thinking about that for his drivers, because his drivers are kind of some dedicated business. And so just really working on customer satisfaction and so then he was thinking about a way to maybe offer a bonus to his drivers based on that. Another company had a profit sharing type bonus. If the company was below X amount of percentage of OR, then everybody in the company, there was a pool of money went into a bucket, and then that bucket was split out among everybody. So that gets everybody in the company, drivers and non-drivers, considering how can we increase our profitability, keep our OR down, and so that we get a piece of the pie.
Okay, great. And just another question on the same topic is, what about using safety analytics for the bonus system?
And so, yeah, when you say safety analytics, that's interesting. So now you're looking at hard braking and speed, I think is what they're talking about. I guess I'd go back to my first comment. You know, most of your safe drivers aren't going to not have hard braking, not have hard turns, not be speeding because they're afraid of losing their analytics bonus. They're going to do those things because they understand that those things lead to accidents. So they're not going to put themselves in that position in the first place. And then I guess what just really popped into my brain right when you said that is, so let's say, I mean, things happen. So I realized the person who asked that question probably would have a threshold. You know, John, we're going to give you 2 a month. We understand, or 3 or whatever the number is. We understand trucking happens. And, you know, somebody's going to cut you off and you're going to have to get on the binders. So there's going to be a couple of those. But what you don't want is your driver going, oh man, I've got to stop. And they're kind of running up on somebody just to try to beat the system, try to beat the system that's logging a hard break. I don't know. It wouldn't be one of my first choices.
Okay, good. Well, the person that asked that question did offer some additional information. He said that they look at sudden stops, starts, vehicle distance, amount of occurrences against the CSA score, things like that.
Interesting.
That sounds
absolutely
like a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about e-learning for a second. We have 2 questions about e-learning, and they're pretty similar. One is, what are some of the e-learning programs that you've seen for over-the-road drivers? And the other one that is similar is just, are there some that you would recommend?
So what are when you think about e-learning for over-the-road drivers, there is, man, you've got ProTread, who's been out there forever. You've got Infinity, who's got lots of market share out there as well. Carrier's Edge, which has got lots of market share as well, and they power the Truckload Carriers Association Truckload Academy. I believe they still do. And by the way, Carrier's Edge is who powers Impact eLearning. If you want to know which one I recommend, I think Impact eLearning would be on top of that list. Sorry about that. Anyway, I do. There's all good programs, and what's it going to come down to? When you're looking at an e-learning, I think there's 3 things that come to mind immediately that I'd say as you're considering this, what should you look for? One is going to be accessibility. And as I mentioned, we have the mobile apps. Now ProTread just came out with a mobile app. I don't know what it looks like, don't know how functional it is, but I can tell you Carrier's Edge has had mobile app for a long time, and they're already and it's a great mobile app. I don't know how Mark's going to make it better, but he says I'm actually about to release an update. We're powered by Carrier's Edge, and it works pretty well. That mobile app, our usage, so accessibility, went from fighting to get fleets, about an average of 60% completion to over 80% completion. Now there are some fleets that always had 100%, but then there's others that seem to be about that 60-70% percentile, and that's hard to get them there. But as soon as we got we switched over to being powered by Carrier's Edge, the usage went through the roof because the drivers love the mobile app. So accessibility, the mobile app is phenomenal. It's really, frankly, a game changer. Second is content. And folks, you are not looking, don't check the box. It's kind of like people that buy insurance, and so they buy insurance and it's $25,000. And you know what? Okay, I met the legal requirement. I got insurance. I can check the box. Well, do you want to check the box, or do you really want to cover your risk? We had a storm damage on a house, and I carry replacement insurance, and they came in and put a brand new roof on the house, and I I paid a deductible and walked away. I didn't have to pay the difference between proration and all that crazy stuff. You know, I don't want to play those games. So are you, the same is true on e-learning. Do you want, okay, I assigned training. They didn't have to watch it to pass the test, but you know, we assigned it, they signed in, they played it, they turned around when they weren't paying attention, answered the questions because any kindergarten can pass it, and then we got a record, they got it done. Or do you really want to change behavior? Do you really want to impart knowledge? And that's one reason why I changed from the system I used to work with to the system, you know, being powered by Carrier's Edge. We not only have access to the content that Carrier's Edge has in their catalog, but also the content, the impact that I've loaded up as well. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to pass the test on our system, you better watch the video. The safety director of a large trucking company watched the hours of service, and he thought, well, this is pretty cool. That was easy to get in. Yeah, I know hours of service. And he didn't watch the video, and he failed the test. He loved it. He said, that is cool. That's what I'm talking about. And we've had lots of clients say our drivers love this training because it actually is quality, and it really gives them great information, and they have to pay attention to pass the test. So you got access, you've got quality of content, and next, of course, you're going to look at price. And I think you're going to be hard-pressed to beat our pricing model. I want to win on every point. I want to have the best content, the best system, and the best price. And then lastly, service. Back in January of 2000, I started providing e-learning. And we offer a fully managed system. And the reason we do this is, why do most fleets only assign training as corrective action? And the answer is, it's not because you don't see the value in doing it all, you know, as initial training and ongoing development. It's just you don't have time. And so you're just in reaction mode. And man, I feel for you. And I understand it. And it's just for real. So I developed a system wherein for fleets that want it, we call it the platinum level of service. You know, I have staff. It's just like a person sitting right outside of your office, and we will, you know, we'll reach out to you at the beginning of the month, say, hey, listen, based on the time of the year and industry events and what's going on in your fleet, we'd recommend this training. Do you agree? And make it easier for you to go, yep, sounds good to me. Boom. We assign the training to your drivers. We notify the drivers of the training. Mid-month, we remind them to take their training. Toward the end of the month, we mention to the fleet managers that, hey, these are your drivers that haven't taken their training yet. Please have them go in and do it. And then at the very end of the month, we give you the reports and do it all over again. You know, talking about telematics, what if, here's a dangerous thing. You know, if you're getting the data from telematics and you're not doing anything with it. So what if you had a way that the telematic notification, when there's a hard break that happens, e-learning gets assigned for that person. So we offer the only fully managed service in the industry because we understand for most of you, you just don't have time. And so we make it very affordable and very easy to do. And that's the bulk of our business, is the fully managed clients.
Okay, great. Here's a related question regarding e-learning. Is it harder to get older drivers to use e-learning?
Thank you for that. And by the way, Belinda, I was very nervous about answering that first one, but he asked the questions and I had to answer it because, folks, I in no way mean for this to be an impact e-learning sales pitch. But it is a service I offer, and it is a need. Older drivers, there's a huge misconception that older drivers don't even know how to turn a computer on. I've had safety directors tell me, oh, they can't do that, you know, computer-based training because our guys don't even know how to turn the computer on. The truth is, most of the time when the safety director says that, they're talking about themselves. Just, you know, I'm here to be real. And it was amazing. I was out in Oregon with one of our clients. I spoke at their driver safety meeting, and they had 10 of their drivers on the e-learning, and they were on a different system, and then they were moving over onto Impact, and there are 10 drivers that did the test, and there were young ones and old ones, and they were like, guys, and they got the mobile app, it's so cool. And so then we had a table and everybody signed up, and there were a couple of the older drivers that walked up and said, well, I guess I'm going to get one of them smartphone thingamajiggers now. And a couple other ones walked up and said, well, put that app on my phone for me, you know, and so we stuck it on there. Folks, we do not have a problem of getting drivers, older drivers to take the training. Here's the problem we have. The problem we have is getting drivers to take the training of all ages, as I mentioned a moment ago. And I have found, and guys, please take this as a takeaway. You want to modify their behavior. You can't force them. You can't motivate them to do it through a bonus. It doesn't work. What works is influence. The influence is, John, why do you do what you do? And when you get them thinking, I do what I do so I can feed my family, now they're motivated to want to do the right thing. And John, I'm here to help you. I'm going to invest in your career, because, you know, if what you do by driving this truck, let's think about that for a second. You have got to have a clean CDL in your back pocket. You have got to have a DOT physical in your back pocket. And you need to have a clean CSA record. If any one of those things is out of whack, your ability to feed your family by driving that truck has just gone away. So that will influence them, and they'll be like, okay, I mean, I appreciate it, and I'm willing to invest in your career for you. I'm going to give you the training to stop those events before they even happen. And now they'll start doing it. So older drivers, they have smartphones. There's a couple that may not, and they'll be excited to get smartphones. But the truth is, I don't know of any e-learning that can't be taken even on a regular old computer. And we used to, on a system that didn't have the smartphones, a lot of our clients had set up computers in their offices, and the drivers could sit there and take their training. But now with our mobile apps, they just don't get used. The guys do it on their mobile phones. It's just so easy.
Okay, great. That makes sense. Here's a good question. How do you overcome challenges of mandating training to owner-operators, like non-employee type situations? They say it's a big issue in California.
Yep. Thank you for asking that. So I asked that question because, folks, you are damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I was like, you know, for crying out, by the way, I hope that wasn't like taken as a cuss word. But anyway, it's like on one side, you're like, I don't want to break the threshold. And on the other side, you're going to wear the accident and the risk and the punitive damages. So I asked a major, and I'm getting a lot of feedback, something weird's going on the phone. I asked a major law firm about that question, and he said, Kelly, here's the answer. An owner, all throughout the regs, it says you must, by means of experience or training, make sure that I'm losing the actual word, but make sure that the driver has this knowledge. Ensure they have the driver, validate they have the knowledge. And this attorney said to me, do not rely on experience. That opens an entire can of worms. So assign them training, or if it's even face-to-face, this goes with both. You can't make them watch the training, but you can make them take the test. So even if you're doing non-online training, you're just doing, it's a live class, you get the owner-operator a chance to come in there, write the test. If they pass the test, they go. If they don't pass the test, well, John, you're going to have to get to where you can pass the test. I got an idea. How about you sit in this class? Same with e-learning. So we can set our program up to e-learning clients that with owner-operators, wherein the video's there, but the owner-operator can go right to the end and take the test. And if they don't pass it, then they got to take it again and take it again until they pass it. Well, you know what? You might as well just watch the video so you can pass it. That's the answer on that deal. You cannot make them take the course, but you can make them take the test.
Okay, great. Here's a good question: is how do you feel that the ELDs will affect state safety versus AOBRDs?
How do the electronic onboard recorders versus the what was the last one you said?
Yeah, the ELD versus the AOBRD, just basically the passing of the mandate versus before.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to make a comment on that. Is there another question we could go with?
Yep.
You know, first off, I do want to say this about the ELDs. Folks, many drivers they don't know how to log. So I have seen productivity, because it fixes that, go up substantially. But I'll tell you on the other side, it requires the operations staff to be really good operators. If your operations staff isn't making the most out of the driver's time, then it'll hurt your fleet. I saw a fleet years ago, had tried it 2 times and had to turn off both times because it killed them. Finally, they got their operations staff on board, and they did it the 3rd time, and it took. But how do I see it affecting safety? You know, one thing I'm concerned about, and I've been concerned about it all along, is, you know, with that clock starting like it starts, and not turning off. You know, when I was a driver, if I got tired, I could take a nap and not worry about it really hurting me. Now that clock starts and you can't take a nap because you're not going to make it where you got to be in time because of the brakes and such. But anyway, that's what I can say on that subject.
Okay, and we have time for one more question, and this sounds like a good one. So we talked earlier about, you know, things like the reports that you get from telematics devices about speeding and harsh braking and things like that. Do you have any best practices of what a fleet should do when they get telematics results?
You know, one thing, and I kind of mentioned a minute ago, folks, I see a lot of fleets getting telematics results, and they go into an email and they sit there and then they pile up. And then eventually they're just sitting there in a file. And folks, all that stuff can be discoverable. You have got to have a system in place that when you get a notification that it is reviewed and then acted upon. And so are you going to put a threshold in that says, you know, we're going to allow a certain number of events, you know, per month, and then we're going to be on the phone talking to this guy, and hey, what is going on? And then at the next level, offering some training to them, and then ultimately bringing them in if you have to, and then releasing them, because you know it's wonderful today. The oversight that we have, and we can tell exactly where the trucks are. We can be live notified if they're speeding in that zone. Hard brakes, hard turns. You know, we have real time oversight, and frankly, even cameras. And but the most dangerous thing is if you have that data and then you don't do anything with it. And then. So I think I'm probably answered it well enough. Just saying, and then assign corrective action and professional development based on it. You know, the other thing I do is look at where's the fleet at for the month. It may not be that people are over thresholds, but kind of what am I seeing out there? What's banging my system? And then let's assign fleet-wide professional development subject to you know, on that subject.
Okay, great. That's great advice. And that, I think, pretty much wraps it up for us today. Kelly, I want to thank you for our excellent presentation. And I want to thank all of our listeners for their great questions, too. We had great questions today. We're happy to have had everyone with us today, and we hope that you found this information beneficial to you and to your fleet. As we talked about earlier, copies of today's presentation are going to be made available to all the participants. You'll get an email at the email address that you use to register for the program that'll have both a link to the recording and also a link so that you can download the presentation documents. So again, this concludes today's presentation, and I want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, Kelly, for presenting.
Thank you very much.